Hola, hola. Welcome to the Money Chisme podcast. So, you're on your financial journey, learning financial literacy, building good credit, avoiding or paying off your debt, building that financial wellness. But then you decide you want to start dating. How do you have these financial conversations with a potential partner? Or what if you're already married and you want to have these personal finance conversations with your significant other? Well, that's what we're going to cover today in this episode. And back with me today is Jessica Perrone, CEO and founder of Her Financial IQ. Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me back. I had so much fun last time, and I'm so excited about today's topic.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, this is the second time being on here. The first time we talked about like credit and some debt management and a lot of other topics. It was a lot when we had so much fun. So make sure you check out episode 58, which I'll link down below. And yeah, there lots of more good information and tips in that episode. But yeah, today we're going to talk about how to have these difficult conversations because it can be touchy. It's a touchy subject, especially if you're like trying to date and ask them about these things. And then once you're married, and I have, experience in both with my husband, I could speak from experience. It was a definitely difficult conversations, but they need to be had. And I wanted to ask you before we got lots of points and talking points that we want to make sure we hit. But I wanted to ask you, why do you think it's important to have these conversations in marriage, or if you're just looking for a potential partner, like start dating?
Oh my goodness, that's such a big question. I feel like we need to narrow it down a little bit. Why to put me on the spot of all the what is to talk about? I'm like popped into my head when you said that. So where I want to start with this conversation then
Hmm.
is it's just the dating stage. And what's interesting is I actually saw a statistic, and I can't remember where I saw it. I have to look for it again. But from what I remember, this
Hmm.
statistic said that a person's credit score is a better indicator for romantic compatibility than anything else.
Hmm.
And I was floored when I saw that quote. But if you think about it, one of the number one things
Hmm.
that couples argue about is money. And all the other things kind of come from that as well.
Hmm.
So there's actually a really fun quiz out there. It's called the Money Script Quiz. And I like for my couples, when I'm working with couples, to take this Money Script Quiz. And basically, your attitudes towards money are ingrained
Hmm.
in you from your childhood. And even before you have a spouse or a more serious significant other, take this quiz, you can gently ask people what their youths were like, what it was like when they grew up. And a lot of people will talk about if they grew up in poverty, if they grew up in an affluent neighborhood, what the journeys of their parents were. And by listening to these conversations, you can start creating. Now, I don't want people to project onto other people either, right? But you can sort of start painting a picture of the way people grew up. And I think we had this conversation last time, Violetta. I'm the oldest of 8 children.
Hmm.
There wasn't any money conversations, and growing up, we barely had enough food, let alone money for clothing, let alone healthcare. I was going to the local university's dental school to have dental work done because we couldn't even afford health insurance, right? We couldn't
Yeah.
afford going to the dentist. So, with that said, my money scripts, and I have worked on them over time, but I am very frugal. I am. And
Hmm.
I am the type of person that can walk through TJ Maxx or Marshalls and go
Mhm.
through that tchotchke aisle and not buy anything. Like, that's
Yeah.
exactly because when it comes to, like, spending money, I'm like, "Okay, what is the return on my money? What is this for? Is this for a good use?" That's the
Yeah.
trip that's going through my head. So you can really get to know a person by just asking them about their past and really be interested and really
Mhm.
be engaged and this is the fun part of a relationship.
Yeah.
The feel good part. Everyone, you have those feel good drugs. You're getting to know someone. You're like, oh, you're the best ever. People start wearing off, and you're like, who the heck is this person? I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm
Yeah.
joking. I'm joking. So that is a really big thing. And then the other thing is also just having the conversations, even like when you're going to dinner. Like
Mhm.
if you're going out to dinner, having that conversation of who's paying it and, well, do you want to go to a more expensive place or a not so expensive place and why? And maybe even say, hey, I'm on a budget this month and that's why I'd rather go to this one, right? So you can
Yeah.
start like having those conversations in a very soft, non-confrontational way to really get to and see if someone has compatible senses. But the funny thing is that opposites do attract. So you will
Yes.
find like a super spender with a super saver. And you know what? The super spender is like, wow, this super saver can potentially really help me and teach me things. And the super saver is like, hey, this person's going to help me open up my wallet a little bit more. So you do see these opposites attracting in relationships as well. I talked for a long time. Violetta, did you want to really quickly? I'm sorry. I have
Yeah, I just no, yeah, I was listening to you, and one of the things that you brought up was about the credit score can determine like how well that relationship does, which I can see that because I mean, finances is one of the main reasons for like divorce because they have like financial problems that come up or they're not, I guess their financial views are not aligned. And so there's a lot of, or you have the saver versus the spender, and they're just not able to meet in the middle or whatever. So that makes sense as well. And I definitely, I wouldn't say we're not like polar opposites, but we definitely came with different mindsets with how we view money. And you mentioned the how we're raised. That definitely played a part with mine, especially with me. I had a lot of financial anxiety, which in hindsight, my husband did too. But that meant we avoided a lot of these conversations. So my husband avoided the conversation. I avoided the conversation when we were dating and we were just like, okay. And then there was the mindset that like, okay, maybe it's not my business. I think I had to get over that well mentality eventually because then we got married and then we had to have the conversations. But how I guess that could be, one of my questions as well, like, changing that mindset because you might think when you're starting a date that, like, it's not your business.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And it's interesting because you'll ask all of these personal questions, right? You
Yeah.
you were asked the friends and to dish. You got all everything. You have the whole 9 yards on this individual. But you're right. People are afraid to ask financial questions. I actually have a freebie for you, Violetta, to put
Mhm.
in the chat afterwards, which is an actual list of questions and topics that you really want to go over before you get married. And so I
Yeah.
put together that list for your viewers and they can just sign up for it right on. You've been so good about including the
The links
URLs.
here.
And this is a really great overview of topics to make sure that you go through. And I even have it like separated by
Mhm.
while you're dating and then also right before you get married as well.
Nice. Yeah, what's funny is that we have no problem asking, like, "What's your astrology sign? Are you, like, a Scorpio or this?" Or, "What's your love language?" Or all these other things to check for compatibility, but then with finances, we're like, "Yeah, no, we're just gonna not talk about it and stuff." So, I hope we after this episode, people feel, like, less taboo about it or more confident in what to ask and make sure that they are asking these questions. And with that, I want to get into your pointers and advice and tips for someone that is looking to ask these questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. The other thing, if you don't mind me to just follow up on a few things that you said
Hmm.
too. We always have these great conversations, I feel,
Yeah.
and things that you
We're
said,
always
and
going back
so
and forth because we're
yeah,
like,
so I hope you don't mind that if I just digress a
yeah.
little bit here. There's a couple thought processes here, just in finances. Some people are very good at finances, and some people are really bad at finances, but some people aren't intentionally bad about finances. And then, so the people that aren't necessarily good at finances sometimes have just never been taught. And
Hmm.
there's also, and I'm not sure if I talked about this on the last podcast or not, but there's a whole thought process now with learning patterns that it's not that we're not good at things. So some people say, I'm not good at math and I'm not good at reading. It's just that you haven't had enough hours of practice in it to get good. And
Hmm.
I could tell you that with money and with budgeting and different types of accounts and credit scores, heck, I didn't know that I need what a credit score was and how important it was until later on in life. Yes, I
Hmm.
knew I couldn't take out student loans because my parents' credit score wasn't good, but I didn't really know what a credit score was. And I feel that there are people out there who may not have the best financial shape because they just don't know any better. But if someone that is a in a good financial shape is
Hmm.
interested in someone that's not in such great financial shape, but the person that's not in great financial shape is willing to make changes and willing to start making a budget and willing to start turning around their financial situation.
Hmm.
And that is a green flag. Okay.
Hmm.
So I don't want people to think, oh, every single person with debt is bad and to stick away from
Hmm.
them. There are people who have happenstances, things happen in a family, layoffs happen,
Hmm.
things happen. So to be compassionate with a person, to understand that person is part of a relationship, right? We want
Hmm.
that not only with money topics, but also just with everything that's going on. And then
Hmm.
there's the people, unfortunately, who have a similar sort of a compulsivity
Hmm.
with spending that is similar to addiction, that is similar to alcoholism or drug use, that an individual cannot help with.
Hmm.
And that type of situation it's very helpful to have a therapist get involved in that type of situation. So I do want to show both aspects. Okay. I do
Hmm.
want to talk about both aspects because you do have both of them. You have the
Yes.
ones where the people are, it's just happenstance, they don't know. And then you have the other people that, you know what, they're going to need help to get out of that.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely, again, speaking from experience with my husband, at first, when I found his financial situation, it was a little scary at the beginning. But then when he told me the story, he had gone through divorce and the whole child custody battle and all that stuff, that got really like that sank him, and it took a few years of hard work to like get him back up because he had all that debt to pay off and everything, and just work through it together. And it wasn't because he was making, like you said, poor financial decisions. It's just life happens sometimes. And we do need to have that compassion. And he was willing to learn and get on track and everything like that. And now he has a better credit score than me now. He's like,
Yay!
and he's like, "Remember when I was, like, almost non-existent because it was horrible, and now it's, like, better than you?" I was like, "Yeah." So, yeah, it just takes some patience, some guidance. I wasn't an expert either. It was just supporting each other, and which is mostly what this is really entails, is to have these conversations, but like you said, think about the reasons and don't have to, like, try to fix everybody because some of them need extra help, like you said. So definitely had to have these difficult conversations, which brings me to the first point, was that we just had to be open and honest at the beginning.
That's such a great lead in. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that, but you're absolutely right. There is such thing as financial infidelity. There
Mhm.
is. And I just listened to a podcast and it was so interesting, this podcast, and it was well timed. And
Uh-huh.
basically, in this podcast, it was a doctor that said
Mhm.
that frequently we blame the individuals that have the financial infidelity. There you go.
Yeah.
And we blame them.
Mhm.
And but in essence, sometimes it's because they have agreed to something that is too restrictive and just
Mm.
don't know how. So, for example, couple A,
Mhm.
there is, and I'm just talking, and I do want to just talk about there are all different types of relationships out there. There's
Mhm.
marriage, there is partnerships. So,
Mhm.
a lot of these topics that I'm talking about today, I may generalize in certain ways, but please, I want everyone to know that I totally believe in being inclusive.
Mhm.
Uh, but this is just the way that I'm describing it out just as we're talking. So, apologies for anyone out there that does not feel included in the conversation.
Mhm.
But so couple, they have a great budgeting date night. They both come
Mhm.
out feeling great. They've done their numbers. They're like, okay, we have X amount of money for our needs, our housing, our everything that we pay for together. And this couple has decided that they are going to have distributions to their own accounts so that they have a little spending money on the side that the other person doesn't
Mhm.
have to see. Right.
Mhm.
And then so this is but they know about it, they just don't want they don't want everyone to see everything, and I have actually have a couple examples of this, which is kind of interesting as well to add to this one. And they both agree and they say, "Okay, we're gonna do this." But maybe, just maybe, the other
Mhm.
person starts on this journey and goes, "Oh my goodness, I cannot do it. I
Mhm.
cannot make things work on this agreement, but I don't want to go back.
Mhm.
I feel bad that I wasn't able to do it." Or
Mhm.
maybe that person goes back to the partner and says, "Hey, I need more money. I can't do it on this budget." And that
Mhm.
person says, "Oh no, you could totally do it." You know what I mean? Like not listening, not being inquisitive or whatnot. And
Yeah.
it puts that person in a tight spot. Maybe for whatever reason, gas money is more than they
Mhm.
anticipated. Maybe there was a breakdown in the car or something. Like you said, stuff happens. And maybe that person
Mhm.
had to go out and get another credit card to cover those expenses. What's interesting that what this research says is
Mhm.
that sometimes it is the restrictive situation that individuals in that drives them to have the financial infidelity.
Mhm.
So again, having that open and honest communication and really understand that budgets are fluid. Like even
Yeah.
myself on my own budget, right? I'm fluid. Some months I have kids back to school, other months I have holidays. It is
Mhm.
fluid. And what works for me might not work for another person. So the budget as a couple is doubly fluid, right? And then you do need to revisit it and work on it and really expect to have an ebb and flow and a working
Yeah,
relationship on that budget as well.
for
Does that
sure.
make sense what I was talking about?
Yes,
But
I feel like you were talking about me with that
oh,
couple because to be honest and transparent here is I feel like I was that one, the restrictive one, and my husband was just like, okay. And I've had to learn to dial it back and because of like the financial anxiety and stuff like that, I just was like pretty, I guess, controlling with my finances and stuff. And I have to have them like this. And I have this plan and everything like that. And plus I'm a planner and like which is opposites there too. And but I have had to learn to be more flexible with the budget and we've readjusted it like a billion times at this point because like you said, it's supposed to be fluid and just have the basis, make sure you're saving, investing or whatever the main goals are, but also have that flexibility, understanding and support each other when like you said, some months it's going to be kind of harder, some are going to be easy. We've had to learn that. So it's a lot of life lessons that we learned. And Thankfully, we've made through it because I know sometimes that could be a huge obstacle in some relationships, but luckily we're very understanding and we work through our stuff and talk about it. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
And that brings us to our next like point, which is budgeting money together. Look at it. We
Yeah.
don't even put that on our like
Look at
list
this.
here, right?
We don't
It
need the
just sort
list.
of it just shows off. So, but yes, budgeting money together is
Mhm.
fluid. And it's interesting because there's also different ways to set up your accounts as
Mhm.
well. And different people have different strategies on that. Um, so even that setup for the budgeting is it can be tough at times, but
Mhm.
having that conversation, especially before you get married, can really help alleviate these anxieties going forward and like just establishing, okay, this is going to be one person's role, or we're going to do it together. But if it's one person's role, understand that it does take a lot of time and effort.
Mhm.
You might say, "Oh, you do it," and you think you're being all nice and everything, but and then you're like, you don't realize how much work and effort it takes to just
Mhm.
pay bills and just make sure that you didn't get double charged or calling the company, the credit card company, or calling the insurance company, like all the work that goes into it. So that in itself, by having someone else working on that role, does put a lot of pressure on their shoulders too. And
Mhm.
also, if they do something that they think is good for the two of you, it might not be malicious. They didn't necessarily do it maliciously. That's just the way they would do it. And if you all of a sudden come in and say, "Well, what?"
Chippy.
Right? You're like, "Oh, wait. No one can see me today. This is so strange because I'm
Yeah.
like, I move with my hands and I'm realizing that today's is the podcast. And so I'm listening to myself. I'm going, people are not going to understand what I'm saying because they can't see my hands. Oh, oh my goodness. So, um, where were we? We were talking about joint.
Budgeting money. Mhm.
Yeah, we're talking about budgeting. And that really does lead into our next one, which is joint financial goals. Now,
Mhm.
date nights, joint financial goals, visualizing the future. That's romantic.
Mhm.
That's fun.
Yes,
Thinking
that's the fun
about
part.
where you guys want to go. And the money is just the steps that you need to take to get there. But what a wonderfully romantic thing to do. I mean, I wouldn't say like most people aren't like, what? A finance date? Romantic? No, it can be romantic, right? Because you're like envisioning the future and you're talking about really feeling things too, which when you get through can really improve a relationship as well. What are your dreams for a vacation? Well, we might not be able
Mhm.
to do it this month or this year, but it's a goal for 2 months. What about that dream house? How many like
Yeah.
times have we dreamed about it or talked about it? What better way to get there than having our budgeting conversations to achieve that dream? What if a spouse just isn't happy in their job? They want to leave it, but it's going to put a little bit of burden on you guys for a little bit. Well, maybe we want to start budgeting a little bit on the side to have a little bit more of a nest egg so that spouse, that individual can escape that job that's bringing them down that potentially could be bringing down the full family.
Mhm.
So these date conversations and these envisioning the futures and the future financial goals, what you want your dream, where you want to live, where you want to end up. These can be beautiful conversations to have.
Mhm.
They don't necessarily have to be restrictive. I know and that's the funny thing because the first thing people think of with budget is restrictive. No, let's
Yes.
think big picture romance. This budget is going to take you into your romantic future together.
That's gonna be the real right there. That's gonna be the real.
So, for example, Violetta, have you had that future goal, that dream? Have you had that dream conversation?
Yes, that we're in actually the process of you just hit it right now of like me taking maybe 6 months and then at the 6 month mark, see if I could go with the year to just not be at work. So I could really focus on like the podcast and money teasement and all that. And we've had this conversation. Look, I would really like to really give it my all and maybe do maybe 6 months. And then at the 6 month mark, we'll see from there. So we've been doing that. Then we're talking about the home that we want to build and a lot of, yeah, romanticizing of our future life. And we're doing a lot of budgeting and figuring out how we're going to get to those goals, especially right now that there's lots of moving parts with him changing jobs and then me next year doing the same things. And then we had the baby and then we're going to move. So, like, a lot of stuff, but it's not, I guess that's not necessarily stressful, but like negative as you would think. Like you would think that would be a negative conversation to have, but we've had fun just dreaming up of how we're gonna do all this stuff and setting our plan. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the things we're doing right now, and it doesn't have to be such a negative thing.
Violetta, this is pretty amazing, our conversation today, let me tell you. And I love how we're potentially inspiring so many couples out there to
Hmm.
have these money conversations and not be intimidated by them and make them into loving conversations. Because once you make it into a loving goal, like you and your spouse are a team. And you
Hmm.
know what? When you are in sync and when you are in step, you can build mountains, move mountains, tear down mountains, right?
Hmm.
And the same
Yeah.
thing with your finances. It's about finding that step and being in alignment, being that team and really being each other's cheerleaders too and support
Hmm.
network instead of really dragging people down.
Yeah.
I almost feel like this is, yeah, a marriage counseling
I know, right?
call today, but it is. It really is. It really is because
Yeah.
it is therapy. Like couples
Yeah.
financial coaching that I do with couples, there is a lot of therapy that goes into it. And
Hmm.
there's so many wonderful things, and there's so many interesting things, and so many
Yeah.
layers to peel back. But when you are in step with your spouse and you have these hopes and dreams and you are on a team that has a goal, has a purpose together,
Mhm.
we all do better that way. Just think of even at and I'm about to not make it romantic anymore for just a little bit, and then we'll go back to the romance because we all just want to hear about the romance. Uh, but just think about like a team. Think about a
Yeah.
team at work or a sports team or whatnot. When everybody has a purpose, like the coach is the cheerleader, we're all brought together. We got this. Guess what? They get it.
Mhm.
They hit those goals, whether it's the sporting team or whether it's the work goals or whether it's the quotas, right? When they have a purpose together as a team, then wonderful things happen and wonderful things
Yeah.
can happen to couples and their finances as well.
Yeah, yeah, which is one of our next ones with that you wanna talk about is managing the debt together, like, doing it as a team. And if you had debt, that's one of the things we had to knock out too because he had a lot of debt because of the prior situation. But we did it as a team. He focused on paying off the debt and then worked our finances around that goal and everything. So that's another thing that you can do together.
Right. And when you pay off those debts, those payments can go to your dreams, right?
Yes.
So,
Like,
like, that is a wonderful thing too. Like the day that you like see that debt go away and then that goes towards
mhm.
your dreams, it goes towards your house, it goes towards your retirement, it goes towards your investing, it goes towards wealth. Yeah.
Yes.
That is an amazing thing when you guys can turn the ship together and take it
Mhm.
from debt and well, change the flow, the
Yeah.
cash flow to positive, to surplus. That is
Yeah.
amazing thing to do together, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely one, especially having without the guilt too, because sometimes some couples will be like, you figure it out. I didn't bring this debt or whatever. It's like if you really want to make that your relationship work and everything like that, you have to realize that it's gonna take both of y'all. Like you can't just keep on. guilt tripping them and acting like that's not your dad because you're married, especially if you're married, it is your dad. You have to just do it together. And we kind of go a little bit backwards to the budgeting money together, which we budget together, but also have your own individual budgets. And that's what we have as well. I have my budget, he has his budget, and then we have our joint budget. So when we're doing our budgets, we have all three of them up, and we're like, okay, so what's going on with you? This what's going on with me? This is the house stuff. It's still important because we each have our own goals as well. Maybe I want to take a course of, I don't know, knitting or something, right? Like, I don't know, that might be a few $100s or something. Maybe he wants some random game or a new computer or whatever, right? Individual things that you might need. And then I think it's always important as well because you never know what might happen. So, what do you think about the individual budgets?
Oh, I am a big fan of having your own account as well as a joint account.
Mhm,
And that is just because I don't like asking people for money.
mhm.
It's doesn't make me feel good. Like, doesn't make me feel good to have to ask my spouse for money. It makes me feel yucky.
Yes.
Like, and I'm sure it makes a lot of people feel yucky. Like, why? This is our money. It's my
Mhm.
money in there too. Like, why do I have to ask that person for money? It just
Yeah.
that whole concept can really create some animosity within.
Mhm.
And also when you don't, especially if you're like polar opposites, like one is
Yes.
a spender and one is a saver, right? Like it can also help prevent friction
Mhm.
from judgment as well. So
Mhm.
for example, say you are a brands girl, okay? You are a
Mhm.
brands girl, and you have not been spending money on anything else. You have been saving for months and months and months and months and months. Okay, this
Mhm.
not you, Violetta, but
Yes.
this fictional person, and it could be male or female, because I know some guys
Mhm.
out there that like to look good too.
Mhm.
Uh, and so that individual is saving up for this brand. They're not spending it on
Mhm.
anything else. They're staying within budget, but they're saving up for it. And then they go out and purchase it. Okay.
Mhm.
And then the spouse likes to go out in the finer foods. So
Mhm.
is spending that on like going out with the boys or girls or whatever it is, and is spending it on a regular basis, right?
Mhm.
There's no friction because
Yeah.
they don't see what each other are doing with those monies, but they're not going outside of those budgets. That's the
Mhm.
very important thing. And that's where the infidelity comes in. Because if you have agreed on a budget and you have things set, you can have, if you go outside that and get debt that the other person doesn't know about, that is infidelity, right? That
Mhm.
is not the open and honest communication. Okay.
Mhm.
And that's where the regular financial check ins come in. It's
Yeah.
really super important to check in to see how each other are doing and to see if those budgets need to be created as well.
Yeah.
And we all have our own hopes and dreams and goals as well. I think about when I created her financial IQ. I have to think about I was trading on the side. I was creating my own nest egg. I didn't need
Mhm.
anyone's permission to create the company. We had our egg for the
Mhm.
home and the kids and whatnot, but I was able to use monies on the side to create my company. And I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine anyone telling me, "No, you can't do that. You can't have your hope and dream." So it's not just the financial aspect of it, it's the hope and dream aspect of it, squashing a hope and dream. And I really feel like it's not just money. It's
Yeah.
about all of these undercurrents. It's just like the ocean. There's a riptide under there. It looks calm
No.
on top, but there might be a riptide underneath it for sure.
Yeah.
Really being curious and wondering about your significant other. And I think that in general is a really great way to have a relationship. Is if someone's acting out, if someone's like acting weird, not saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, what's up with you? What's going on? Hey, you seem off. Is everything okay?" Like approaching things with compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some great advice and tips, and definitely with the check-ins, and all of these were just great tips that I had to learn along the way, and some I had to really reflect on myself, and so did he, and everything like that. And we figured it out, continue to figure it out. But that's the important thing, that you're figuring it out together and it's getting figured out, that it's not just being hidden and never talk about it. We're just going to avoid it type stuff. So, this is really important conversations to have, so I'm glad that you came on here to share your tips and have this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I want people to know that these conversations are tough to have. And that's why there are people like myself, a financial coach that actually works with couples to create this financial harmony, to work on the budgets, to help to have these conversations, and also create an even playing field when sometimes just even the education, understanding, whatnot, whatever it is, just having a compassionate person that's not going to judge either party, who just wants your harmony at heart. And that's really what I do with my coaching beyond the courses I offer as well.
Awesome. I will have that guide that you have. I think it was called Love and Money, and I will definitely have that. I'm gonna sign up to get that guide, and I'm gonna go bug my husband. He I feel like every time I do a podcast, I go bug him about something I learned or something. So I'll definitely have
Next one is
that.
going to be the three of us. It's going to be a live session.
Right. But yeah, again, I'll have all your information linked down below. But other than that, again, thank you for being here. And
It's my
that's
pleasure, Violetta. And
awesome.
anytime you want me back, we have such wonderful conversations. I'm happy to come back, especially getting closer to the holidays. That's a
Yes.
whole another kit or caboodle, whether it is a couple or a family or extended family or an individual.
Hmm.
It was that budgeting for the holidays, let me tell you. I'm already having workshops
Yes.
on that topic right
Yeah,
now.
I'm already planning it. It's like, well, should I travel? Should I not travel? Because then it's like that's one of the things we actually do need to talk about. My husband and I figure out what's the plan, because people are already starting to ask, "Are y'all coming over here?"
And it's
So
funny
yeah,
because my workshops for even the holidays starts with, what are your hopes and goals for the holidays? How
yeah,
do you envision it for yourself?
yeah,
And it's so interesting how just that exercise can apply on so many levels financially, whether it's a couple, whether it's your goals, whether it's the holidays, whether whatever it is, starting with your hopes and goals and then budgeting into it, or
yeah,
figuring out how to increase your income to get there. It's a hope and a dream, and you can do it. You
yeah.
can do it as long as you keep your eyes on that prize.
Mhm.
I know you can do it. I know all of you listening out there, you're making the first step just by listening today.
Awesome. A lot to think about, a lot of things to get through with your significant other, a lot of good tips. But again, everything's down below, and I will see everyone in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share this episode so others can also find this podcast. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias listed in the show notes below, where you can also find resources to help you in your financial journey. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, you can find that information in the show notes. Other than that, thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.